Hi everybody, my guest today is Adam Wakeman. Adam is a keyboard player whose credits include Annie Lennox, Travis, Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath and many, many more. He also plays guitar. I first met Adam in 2012 when I got him on board to be in the house band for the Marshall 50th anniversary concert at Wembley. And here's what he had to say. Hi Adam.
Hello mate.
How are you?
I'm good. And you good self?
I'm fine, thanks. I was just saying in the intro to this that although this is the Lefty Guitar channel, you are primarily a keyboard player, but of course you play guitar very well. And also, it might sound slightly tenuous, but you've spent a lot of time working with one of the greatest lefty guitarists this country has ever seen in Tony Iommi, which we'll get onto in a bit. I often ask people, were their family musical? Of course, I don't really need to ask you that because it's kind of well and truly in your genes, but I want to know more about when you first started. Was it your choice? And when you started, what was your approach to it, and go from there?
Well, it's a weird one because obviously you're aware my dad's a musician, Rick Wakeman, and that was, my parents split up when I was about 3 years old. So I lived with my mum in a very kind of normal upbringing with my mum Ros and my stepfather John. And then, but then there was these kind of odd weekends where I'd go and visit my dad and he'd be playing at Wembley Arena or whatever. So it'd just be this crazy kind of, weekend, staying up all, till 3 a.m. as a youngster, and then getting dropped back very late on a Sunday and then getting dragged out of bed for school on a Monday morning, and it was all back to normal again. So it was sort of a weird, slightly schizophrenic upbringing, but it was when I saw my dad at, I think it was one of the incarnations of Yes, Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman Howe, or one of those. And I was about 10 years old or 8 years old. And I remember seeing the show at Wembley Arena and thinking, that's it, that's what I want to do. And that was the start of the sort of decision that I wanted to be in music. And up until that point, it was a Greenpeace protester I wanted to be. But I'm not really that keen on boats. So, the Rainbow Warrior is now a distant dream.
So when you started, was it, how did you learn? Self-taught? Did you have lessons? Did you speak to your dad? What was his input?
I had lessons, piano lessons that to go through the grades, the 8 grades, which I quite enjoyed a lot. I know a lot of musicians don't, they maybe do grade 3, grade 4, and then just hate it and just want to do, rock music or pop music or whatever. But I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the sort of dedication of the scales and the kind of the technique that you learn from playing classical. So I really enjoyed it, and I went through the 8 grades. My dad was a funny one because whenever I'd sort of go and visit him at weekends and stuff like that, I'd say, I remember one particular time I said, can you show me that intro to Catherine of Aragon, or one of the 6 Wives of Henry VIII album? And he was in his office, and his office was the same as it is now, where it's just piled up with shit everywhere, like just piles of manuscript and proper sort of mad professor stuff. And I just remember saying, can you show me that thing? And he just handed me a cassette and just said, if you want to learn how to play it, just go and learn how to play it. And I sort of walked out of his office thinking, what is it? I just want him to sit down and show me how to play it. But what that did was kind of really, I played that cassette, until it was worn out, because I wanted to learn how that intro went. So I ended up kind of at an early kind of age developing my ear quite quickly. So I've kind of got him to thank for that, although at the time it was quite annoying.
He must have known though that you were obviously very dedicated to have gone to like those lengths to, you know what I mean, to be asking him.
No, that's nice of you to say so. He just didn't want to be disturbed. He was doing something else. Oh my God. We're parents. We know exactly what it's like at that point. And I constantly remind myself, I have to, that when my kids are asking me things and I'm in the middle of something, I have to stop and think, this is the point that they're going to remember whether I helped them or not do something.
Yeah. And the tables have turned at that point.
Exactly. And it's so important to try and kind of give that time. However, I'm sure I've done a few kind of bad parenting things where I've been asked to do something and And I've just gone nodded. I'm looking at the computer going, yeah, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that will come back to haunt me. A bit like reading books. I don't know, when your kids were young, when you read the book, I when they were kind of about 2 years old, I was so tired by the time the kids were kind of in bed, and I'd get the book out and I'd start at page 1 and then I'd skip 3 or 4 pages. The book made no sense at all because I just missed out half of it. And you could see the confusion on their faces, going, Spot had a dog and a ball, but now he's on a plane. What happened in the middle? You know, I just wanted to get to the end.
Yeah.
Bad parenting tip number 4.
Oh, I know. I remember those days as well, trying to skip the pages so it would try and make sense as well. You're sort of thumbing through the pages as you read and think, how can I get to that page with it making sense or not? Yeah, it's funny the things you're doing. But it's funny to see, you know, like I say, when the tables turn and you become the parent, but you remember being the child asking you, trying to get your parents' attention for these things. So you were very much inspired by the classical stuff. Was there, or was it like anything, any other genres and stuff like that when you were that age? Inspirations and heroes is what I'm kind of getting at.
Okay, so to begin with, I was very focused on what my dad was kind of doing, you know, because they were the only albums that I had. So that was kind of what I was listening. Then once I got a bit older, I got more into the kind of blues jazz stuff. Dr. John, my ultimate kind of hero, piano player. And a little bit of jazz, not a huge amount of jazz. I preferred that kind of blues jazz to the kind of, you know, out there Thelonious Monk stuff, which I kind of I'm into now. And then, you know, Zeppelin and all that stuff. I moved to Devon, down to Bideford in North Devon, where I did my GCSEs at that kind of age. It was weird going from up country down to I say up country, kind of, you know, kind of Berkshire kind of way down to Devon. It was like going back in time a little bit. It was kind of, everyone was still listening to Led Zeppelin and Bob Dylan and, you know, all my mates, all their parents were old hippies, and that was the kind of music that kind of been you know, still around. So I was kind of re-educated into the kind of old school rock, Whitesnake, all those kind of bands. And then when I moved from there to the Isle of Man, it was like going back 50 years. So it's you know, going back in sort of generations. And the Isle of Man obviously was where I did my A-levels over there. And that was the fantastic kind of period for live music for me, because I just joined a couple of bands who were all a lot older than me. And I was playing 4 nights a week. It was fantastic. It was a kind of, you know, it was a fantastic apprenticeship kind of time of, while studying A-levels and doing grade 8 piano, I could go out and play in all these bands and you know, play whatever music was kind of needed that night. It was fantastic, really, thinking how many places and opportunities there were to play live. Yeah,
of course. But did it feel slightly alienating being sort of moving away from where you feel everything happens, ending up on the Isle of Man, and then what was the bridge to try and sort of get back, trying to make a go of it professionally and getting the gigs and that sort of thing?
Well, that from that point, when I left school 18, we had an offer to do a couple of tracks on an album of my dad's, and we called it Wakeman with Wakeman. Basically, the idea was, you know, I'd write a couple of tracks and then we were going to do a couple of shows, and those shows ended up being a kind of 2-month UK theatre tour. And then we did another album and we sort of wrote half of it each, and then we did another tour. And at that point I was like, well, I don't really want to go to university. My plan was to go and study music at university. And I thought, all I'm going to do is come out of university and do this. So for me, it didn't really make sense to then go to university. Sure. I just thought, well, I'm already doing what I want to do. So that's kind of what happened. I, you know, worked with my dad for, at that period, sort of 8 years or so, 7 or 8 years, where we were constantly touring and producing albums. And then I kind of ended up, I was really choosy about doing other gigs, mainly because I wasn't comfortable or secure enough in myself to think that I could do a good job doing it. It was a really kind of, looking back on it, a lot of missed opportunities, because I just felt, I didn't feel in my comfort zone for whatever reason. But and as all musicians, you know, will know, it's like you don't find your comfort zones until you do a load of shit that you find out what you're really good at and what kind of you don't feel comfortable in. So I didn't do a lot of stuff outside of my own projects and working with my dad until I was kind of, you know, mid-20s. And then I kind of sort of more out of necessity, really, is I kind of, you know, I had a mortgage to pay and I didn't have any money. So I had to kind of do something.
Of course. But was it at that point as well, you felt you were stepping out and being your own person a bit more and coming out of the shadow of your dad? And was that more of a thing that you wanted to be taken? And you knew you had it in you at that point, I'm sure, that you could just be your own independent musician and then sort of go off and do things, having sort of worked those early gigs with your dad so much.
Yeah, interesting that was always an issue for me to start with, because the amount of people that would come to my dad's shows, you know, and there was a novelty of seeing me there, but, you know, let's face it, they were coming to see my dad and I just happened to be there as part of the show. And I was fully aware of that, but it kind of niggled me after a little while, is that it was almost like this kind of, well, you're only doing this because, you know, it's your dad's kind of thing. And my dad was aware of that as well. And he would always try and feature me and give me a lot to do in the show, so that, you know, people could see that I could play and I wasn't just there as cheap labor. It was kind of, there was a purpose to it. But then, yeah, as I started doing more stuff outside of it, it was kind of, you know, I felt a bit more kind of like I was sort of forging my own sort of path a bit. And it was a lot of pop stuff, really, to start with. It was kind of, you know, Atomic Kitten, crikey, there were a lot of these kind of TV shows where, you know, they're just not really around so much now, but there were kind of like this one called T4. There was the early morning TV shows always had a band on at some point, you know, or an artist on. So I did loads and loads of those for years. And and then the work with my dad kind of lessened as I took on more other stuff, and then went and did things like Annie Lennox and Travis and those bands. And it was kind of that then took over more time, you know.
Of course. And at that point, you know, I'm sure no one was even, you know, second guessing what your surname was, you know, because you've proved your worth at that point. And yes. I know if we were to talk about everyone you've played with, we'd be here for a very long time. So those early days when you first started going out, and the diversity amongst it is something you always try and explain, because it doesn't matter who you're playing with or what the genre is. A gig is a gig, essentially. Like you say, Atomic Kitten, Annie Lennox, you know, they're quite different, although in the pop genre. What were some of your highlights and like favorite moments from the people that you worked with around that time?
Oh, I mean, Travis was my first kind of, I mean, they're a big band in, it was 2000 when I kind of started.
They were huge.
And
absolutely.
They were a big, they'd had a couple of years off after Neil, the drummer, had broken his neck in an accident. So they had a kind of period off. And then when they came back, that was when they needed a keyboard player for the road. And I got on with them really well, great bunch of guys, and I love the music. I knew a lot of the songs. In fact, incidentally, it's quite a funny story where I was actually away with Annie Lennox in a European tour, and we were playing in Paris, and I got a phone call about going to an audition with Travis. And previously, about a year before, I got an audition for Jamiroquai, and I went along to the audition to Jamiroquai, and I was kind of told it was, it's just come along, it's just a bit of a jam, it's fine, you know. And I got there and realized very quickly, never turn up to an audition thinking it's a bit of a jam, especially with a band of the caliber of Jamiroquai. Yeah, absolutely awesome band. And it went absolutely terribly. It was an awful audition, and I walked out of there going, I'm never going to be underprepared for an audition ever again. Anyway, cut to a year later, I'm on tour with Annie Lennox and get this call to go and meet Fran and have this audition. So I learned the back catalogue. At the time it was maybe 4 albums, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 albums, and I learned all the songs, and I was able to play them all on a piano because I knew I was going to Fran's house and he had a piano, so I made sure I knew all the tunes that I could play on a piano and show that I actually knew all the songs. And so I flew back. I didn't tell anyone on the tour where I was going because it was a day off. just because I just didn't really want them to know I was sort of leaving, and not I was jumping ship from the tour, but just flew back to England, went to his house, had a cup of tea, sat in a teepee in his garden because his wife was pregnant, and that was her kind of birthing chamber. They had this teepee in the, it was about 2 stories high, this thing. It was massive. And he lived at the time, he lived in Crouch End.
I was expecting a big baby or something.
Yeah, massive baby. I just couldn't believe it. I was thinking his neighbours must hate him.
Yeah, can you imagine?
His whole garden's full up with this 2-story TV. Anyway, and he played me the new album, and then he said, "Do you like it?" I said, "It sounds great. Yeah, it sounds like a step sort of on from the last albums, and yeah, it's really interesting." And he said, "So, do you want to do it then?" And I was like, "All right." And he went, "Great, okay, well, we'll be in touch." I didn't play a note, didn't play one note, so I was like over prepared, and then didn't need to play a note. So it was quite a mad experience.
Unbelievable.
So the highlight. Highlight. That was the question. A highlight of with Travis was probably Live 8. So we did Live 8 in London,
right?
And for me, apart from the fact it was one of the last gigs I did with them, and I hadn't worked with them for about a year before, because I was away on a Sabbath tour. I actually flew back in to do that from Sweden, from Stockholm in Sweden, on a day off to do that show, and then flew back out to Sweden the following morning. But it was memorable because I remember at the start of the show, I had a new keyboard tech I'd not met before. He didn't really know how the gear went together. I couldn't remember how the gear went together because it was always Travis's gear, and I hadn't seen it for a year.
Right.
And it was there was no rehearsal, there was no sound check. It was kind of on, go. And I walked on and literally played the first chord, and the keyboard stand just went chink.
Oh,
so
no.
I had the keyboard on my lap for a bit. It was just, and I just remember looking up at one point and just thinking of all the places for this to happen
in front of a worldwide televised audience.
Oh God, yeah, just the however many billions of people watching it around the world. But that was quite a kind of a rewarding time, because it just felt like it was the most, and probably still is, the most important sort of gig I've ever been a part of. It was a fantastic day.
But I've got to say that surely playing with Annie Lennox at a similar time was also as
yeah, I mean, I was jumping at one point between Annie Lennox, Atomic Kitten, and Travis.
Right.
And there was a weekend where I did a Friday with Atomic Kitten, a Saturday with Travis, and then a Sunday with Annie Lennox. At that point, I couldn't retain anything else in my mind other than these 3 sets.
Sure.
Just because it was and I was quite young at the time, and I was kind of, it was it was pretty cool. But Annie was fantastic. She was a very the most honest person I'd met at that point, where she was at the kind of interview that I had before I got the job. She was very open, and and we talked about family and relationships and all sorts of things. I just instantly got on really well with her. I thought she's a really honest sort of lady, and that's most within an industry like ours, which is kind of peppered with crooks and villains, that have come up from the sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, where everyone's got a story of being ripped off and all the rest of it. The flip side of that is that the majority of musicians and artists that we work with are absolutely wonderful people and are genuinely lovely people. So there's not been many people that I haven't enjoyed working with, but I definitely mark her as the sort of up there in the sort of top 3.
Yeah, I bet she always comes across as being so great, and she is legendary now. She's man. So moving on then. Of course, there's many other people, but we really should talk about the whole Ozzy thing and the Sabbath thing. What came first? Was it Ozzy's band, or was it the Sabbath thing, or was it about the same time? And how did it happen?
Right, weird way I got this gig. So Annie Lennox is the connector here, because I was playing in America with Annie. We played in Los Angeles at a theatre I forget the name of, and I remember looking out in the audience and seeing in the kind of front couple of rows, it was just celebrities,
right?
And it was typical kind of LA, you know, oh, Rod Stewart's Amazonianly tall wife, whoever it is, and then, you know, you kind of recognizing these people. And I recognized Sharon Osbourne. She was there with her daughter, Amy. And I said during the interval, I said to our tour manager, a guy called Tony Wiggins, I said, oh, I saw Sharon Osbourne in the audience. I'd love to meet her. And he said, oh, well, I used to work for her father. So after the show, Sharon came back to see him and he introduced me and we chatted for about half an hour, mainly about the Osbournes TV show, because that's what was going on at the time.
Right.
The Osbournes TV show was a massive hit on MTV. And the episode had just come out where the neighbours were pissing them off. So they threw a giant ham
I remember that,
through there. Yeah, it's like the weirdest. And so I was having a conversation with her about that, you know, and she's like, yeah, well, it's just sort of happens, you know, it's kind of just a completely normal thing. So that was the kind of, that was it. I just got on really well with her and went away from that thinking, well, that's really nice to meet her. And I had, we spoke very briefly about, my dad sessioned on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath on that album.
Right. Back
in the day, because it was at Morgan Studios. My dad was in Studio B or Studio A, and they were recording with Yes. And Sabbath were recording Sabbath Bloody Sabbath in one of the other studios. And my dad met Ozzy in the bar. They got hammered, and Ozzy said, oh, why don't you come and play on this tune or a couple of tunes? So that's kind of what happened. So we briefly spoke about that as well. Anyway, cut to 8 months later. I was bored checking my emails, and at the time I had a Hotmail email address which was linked to my website. So anybody emailed the website, it went to this Hotmail account. And for whatever reason, I decided to check the junk mail. I don't know why, because you know, as you know, it sort of deletes after 30 days and you forget about it. So, you know, I was bored. I was looking down. There's all these, you know, all the kind of normal Viagra pills and all that stuff. The cream that makes your penis enlarge and all that stuff, which incidentally doesn't work.
No, it doesn't, does it?
Otherwise, your hands would be massive, wouldn't they? You'd be like massive hands everywhere. You'd be able to tell everybody that's tried them. Anyway, so there was one from it said Divine Recordings or something divine, and at the time, Hugh Grant, the actor, had been in a compromised position with a
Lady of the Night.
Yes, called Divine.
Called Divine. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the filters at the time, there is a purpose to this story, by the way.
I know. I'm loving it.
We'll get to the point.
No, it's fine.
So the filter on Hotmail, anything that had Divine, it flagged it up as porn and was therefore chucked into the junk folder.
Of course. Okay.
And because this came from Divine Records or Divine Recordings, whatever at the time their record company was called, it just put it straight into the trash.
Right.
And it said, the message just said, hi, my name is so-and-so. Can you please give me a call here at Sharon Osbourne's office? And I thought, oh, it's got to be a joke. It's got to be a kind of, you know. So I left it a day or so, and then I thought, you know, I should phone it just in case. So I phoned the number, and sure enough, it was her assistant at the office who said, yeah, Sharon would like to offer you the job to come and play with Ozzy. And I was like that. And he said you certainly were playing it quite cool. He said that was sent nearly a month ago, that email. So another 2 days and it would have got deleted and I never would have got the job. Because they wouldn't have chased me, you know, after a month. So anyway, as it happens, I turned it down because I was in the middle of a tour with Travis. And so I turned it down. They said, well, you know, thanks anyway. See you later. And then Ozzy had his accident on a quad bike. So he was off for 18 months. Then when he came back and they rescheduled the tour, they called me again and I just finished my run with Travis. So I was available. So then I went and did it. And then I went out to America to do the tour 2 weeks before I got the set list, because I kept hassling them saying, you know, do you know the set list? What's going on? 2 weeks before the first festival, which was an Ozfest, they said it's not Ozzy anymore. It's Black Sabbath with Bill Ward back in the band. So it's the four of them. So it would be a Black Sabbath thing. Tony would get in touch with the set list and all that stuff. So that was it. So I was already thinking it was going to be Ozzy, and then a couple of weeks before rehearsal started, it was Sabbath. So my first outing was actually with Sabbath.
That's the craziest story. And do you know what? Some things are just totally meant to be, aren't they? You know what I mean? There were so many opportunities there that you could have missed the gig, but you know, you found the email, you called them up, you turned it down.
Yeah.
And then, you know, fate has a strange way of working. And then Ozzy couldn't do anything because of quad bike accident. Wow. And then bizarrely, you were all set to go in Ozzy's band with Zach and whoever.
Yeah.
But it turns out to be a Sabbath reunion, which must have been like last knock-ins late in the day kind of thing. So what did they say to you then? We still want you to do it, but you're going to be, you know, on keys. And is this when you started doubling up on the guitar?
So this is, to begin with, it was just keys. So I went out there. Ozzy didn't come to rehearsals for a couple of weeks. So I had a couple of weeks and met Tony and started with Tony, Geezer and Bill. And I was pretty much playing, you know, everything on a sort of distorted Fender Rhodes kind of sound. It was kind of, I was doubling the guitar parts as best as I could on keys to, so that there was something there when Tony was soloing. That was the kind of thing, because there aren't really that many keyboards. There's a bit of strings on Snowblind, a few samples in War Pigs and Start of Black Sabbath, a few other sort of little bits and pieces, but predominantly it was just kind of keeping a rhythm thing going, either on a distorted Hammond or a distorted Rhodes, kind of depending on what the tune was. And then there was one song at the end. Tony said, "Do you play guitar?" And I said, "Yeah, you know, a little bit." And he said, "Can you just play rhythm guitar on Paranoid, just on that one tune?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I used, obviously he was left-handed. I didn't have any guitars with me, or I didn't have any guitars on the road because it was a keyboard playing gig.
Sure.
So I used Mike Clement's guitar. Mike Clements was Tony's guitar tech.
Yeah.
And Mike had a guitar that was made same spec as Tony's, but right-handed. So that Mike could go and check all the gear and check the amps and everything. Because as you well know, you pick up a guitar that's left-handed and you're right-handed, you might as well be, you know, taking your arms off and playing it with your feet. It was kind of, so I used that guitar for that tour, just playing that one song. And then as it developed over the years and we did more and more tours, when Sabbath took a break and Ozzy went out on the road and I was doing that, when Gus G came into the band, which was 2010, 2011, that kind of time, 2010, we sat down and had a chat about stuff. And I said, it'd be great to, you know, a couple of the tunes, like when we play Sabbath songs with Ozzy, it'd be kind of better if I played rhythm guitar rather to make it more authentic. And Gus is all about kind of authenticity and making things sound the best they kind of, you know, they can for, you know, because he was filling a kind of multitude of chairs in that band at the time, where we were doing quite a long set. We were sort of touching 3 hours at some point. So we were doing Jakey Lee stuff, we were doing Randy stuff, Zach stuff. Yeah. And Gus was brilliant at kind of replicating all of these guitarists.
And that's got to be one of the hardest gigs to try and do because of his caliber of the guitarist he's always had throughout the years. So hats off to him, you know.
I think he was amazing. He was I mean, still is a very good friend, and he was such a humble kid. You know, I say kid, you know, he's a little bit younger than me, and he was just so it was so nice to see the kind of enthusiasm and professionalism from a kind of young player. And it was all about making sure it was right. Anyway, long story, even longer. I ended up, you know, then playing the guitar parts, rhythm guitar parts on the Sabbath tunes that we played. Cut to then Tony coming to a gig in Los Angeles, an Aussie show. They were having a meeting about some future Sabbath stuff. So this must have been about 2016, no, 13, 16, something like that, 15 or 16. No, 2013. So that was a 13 album, Sabbath's 13 album, which was 2013, I think. And Tony saw me playing the guitar, and he just said, "Are you comfortable playing more guitar?" I said, I'll do whatever you want me to play, or nothing, whatever, make the tea. I'm kind of easy, sure. Really, I'll do whatever you want. So then I started playing more tunes on guitar, and then when I went back to playing them on keys, or certain songs on keys in rehearsals, Tony would say, "Oh, do you want to do this on guitar as well?" And then by the end of 2017, when we finished the tour, 2018, the last Sabbath shows, I think I was playing 2 songs on keyboards and the rest was rhythm guitar.
Right. So it transitioned that much. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just because that was kind of how it ended up being what sounded more authentic. Yeah. And it's quite a weird thing, because with Sabbath, I'm off stage in a in a kind of tent at the side. Yeah. And it's just it's the weirdest kind of thing,
Yeah. It must be a bit like doing a theatre pit gig, a bit like that, apart from the fact that you're playing with the biggest metal band that's ever lived in stadiums, rather than a pit in a theatre. It must just be so bizarre being behind the curtain playing.
The funny
hearing yourself come out, out front or whatever, knowing that you're out there, but you just sat there. I mean, it must be great though, because you must have a nice little setup, have some drinks going, some snacks.
It was great. I used to get. There was one on the last tour we had. I was sort of below, I was at the side of the stage. So my head height was about here where the stage was. So I was right up, and Geezer I was on Geezer's side of the stage. So he used to sort of come over and sort of try and kick me through the hole in the front of the tent, we had a really good life. Everything was just brilliant. And it was just that bit that was weird to start with anyway, because it was just like everything's the same. You fly to the gigs and everyone's all in the hotel, and it's all really cool, kind of cool. And then you get to the you've got dressing rooms and it's all lovely, and then you walk to the gig, you walk to the stage, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm over here. I'm in here. I'm not up there.
In your jogging pants and your old t-shirt.
I only did that once. I said I was going to be in a dressing gown and just have but Ozzy said, if you do that, I'll pull you up on stage. So I thought, there's no way I'm going to be doing that. But what I did do is there at the side of so on the side of the stage, there's a kind of a blacked out sort of tent around me, and the front of it is open. But the stage lights that were on the floor were so bright. I said to Terry, who's my keyboard tech, I was like, mate, any way we can just put something along this front so I can still see everybody, but just a bit that high so it covers everybody. So he put this bit of line across and this bit of curtain, but it wouldn't stretch all the way across. It was like this bit of curtain would go to about here. So wherever the lights came on, I'd move the curtain over to here or whatever. And in the end, I said, it just looks like a washing line now. It looks like I've got this. So each gig, I'd add a piece of gaffer tape clothing that I'd make, and I'd attach it to this what looked like a washing line in front of my tent. And then wherever I was in my tent, I could move around and I could make different members of the band wear these items of clothing. So at one point I'd have Geezer in a sort of dress, or Ozzy with a kind of these flares on, and
God,
it was just the stuff that kept me entertained.
Oh, that's so good. That is, you've got to do it, man. A couple of things on the whole Ozzy and Sabbath thing before we move on. Just quickly, Ozzy's album Scream, was it Scream? You co-wrote a lot of the songs on that.
Yeah. Now that's again another mad twist of fate, and this is a kind of, it's so important I can't stress this enough to musicians that are listening, that want to, young musicians that kind of think, oh, there's no point, or that will never happen. Because I was in New York on one of the Ozzy shows, and I met Kevin Churko, who's the producer who produced Black Rain and Scream. Now, the way it's always been with Ozzy's albums is he He has a change of musicians on his albums. He has changes of producers. You know, he's the sort of artist that really benefits from changing things. You know, he really kind of felt, you know, and I think that's one of the reasons he's remained so valid, you know, over the years. It's because he hasn't just stuck with the same format.
Definitely.
Anyway, so there was never an expectation, even though I was in the live band, that I'd be used on a recording. It just, you know, that was, if it ever happened, great. If it didn't, it didn't.
Sure.
So Black Rain I wasn't involved with. Zach played all the keys on that album. And during this, I met Kevin Churko, and he sent me a message and said, I'm in New York. Do you want to come and meet for a beer? And we just played the night before, and I got absolutely rat-arsed, and I was incredibly hungover. And I didn't reply, and I thought, do you know what? I could just really do with a day in bed and just not. So anyway, I stayed in bed a while, and then I thought, do you know what? I should really get myself out of bed and go and meet this guy and sort of, you know, have a drink with him. So I did. I got myself out of bed, went out of the hotel, went and met him and his wife in this Irish bar. And I think I nursed a pint of Guinness for about 4 hours. I was so hungover, I couldn't even finish it. And I just got on really well with him. And I remember going back to the hotel thinking, I'll never put myself in a position where I am too hungover that I can't go and meet people that, you know, that have asked for me to go. And yeah, it was just
respectable people. Yeah,
because it gets really easy after a while, especially a long time. And Aussie tours were going on 4 months at a time before I get home, and it was, you know, it was kind of, you know, a little bit of time to yourself was quite kind of precious. Anyway, cut to 6 months later, Kevin is then producing the new Aussie album Scream, and I think they'd just been going a long time, and they recorded a lot of tracks, and he suggested to Sharon that he'd bring me in and we work on some stuff together. So that's kind of how that all came about. And I can't help thinking, if I'd have blown him out to go for that drink, I would never have got to know him and never sort of, you know, kept in touch. And so I was very lucky really to have that opportunity. And he was a brilliant producer to work for, because he was so, he wasn't, it wasn't time intensive. He was just like, look, if we spend all day and come up with one riff or nothing, it doesn't matter, you know. So take those pressures off you. Yeah,
of course.
And you become really creative, and it was great. You know, I spent probably 3 weeks there at the house recording, and yeah, it was a great time.
Brilliant. And the last thing on this whole set, you know, part of your life is the last gig with Sabbath in Birmingham. That must have been something.
Yeah, do you know the weird thing is that cropped up on Instagram or something the other day. I just didn't even think about it, that it was February the 4th, like however many years back. I can't remember how. What is it? 23 years ago? 4?
3?
I don't know. Like 3 years. It seems like longer for some reason. I don't know why, but what was weird about that is that there was this build up through the end of the tour, knowing that was going to be the last show.
Yeah.
And there was almost this sort of weird kind of, you know, there was no big party planned. There was no, you know, there was nothing really planned like that. And it was weird. And I was thinking to myself, why is that? Are they not having? And then I thought, well, it's probably because they've known each other for 50 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, the only benefit of a party is for everybody else. And everybody else that's there is already having a massive party. So it was kind of it was weird. It just sort of finished, and we had a couple of drinks. You know, I drank with Tony and some of his family up at the bar. And I think Ozzy went back. And the other thing, of course, they were still recording in a studio. I'd found them a studio called Angelic, which is near me here, over near Banbury, between Brackley and Banbury. And they were recording some extra stuff for the DVD, the end DVD, which was which came out, you know, about 6 months later. So for them, it's like, well, they're all going to see each other again in a few days' time. So it didn't seem like so final that was the end. But as far as the show went, obviously it was pretty, it was pretty emotional by the very end of it. It was quite mad.
Yeah, I can imagine. I just wonder also if it was one of those, if you ever felt that it was, because it shouldn't really, on the face of it, it shouldn't have been any different from any other Sabbath gig on that tour. And was there an added pressure, knowing that it was the very last one, and did that sort of get in the way or any of that sort of thing,
I think probably for them, there was a, any hometown gig is going to be, is going to present certain pressures, any kind of, for a British band that come from London or come from Brighton, a gig in the hometown, they want it to be more special because it's their hometown. They want to, that's just how it works. For me, it was more about, I didn't want to make any mistakes, because I thought that's going to be, if I fuck it up, then I'm always going to think, oh fuck yeah, I fucked that last that last show up. But I think you have to put, like you said, it's just the same as every other gig, but there was just a little bit of an added sort of special because it was the last one. So.
Yeah, great, man. I want to finish this chat by just talking about when I first met you, which was the Marshall 50th anniversary gig at Wembley that we did would have been September 2012, which is already a long time. Can you believe that was that long ago?
I remember looking at you when you were kind of juggling all these guitar players in your musical director's role, thinking, there's a gig I don't want. I
was thinking the same thing.
Oh man, you were kind of like Kofi Annan in the sort of UN sort of peacekeeping, that you were so you were so kind of calm with each of these guitar players. And I
tried to be.
It was fun.
Do you know what? The whole lead up to that, I mean, because it was literally years in the planning. The whole music bit and the last week, I'd say, with the rehearsals and the actual gig was actually relatively straightforward compared to a lot of the stuff that had come before it. But there are a few standouts that I have of that time. One of them is, do you remember when Yngwie turned up for the sound check at Music Bank, and he was just so fucking loud? It was ridiculous. And I remember looking around the few select people, that were there sort of waiting around or whatever in the rehearsal room, and everyone's just like this. Just the most unbelievable volume. I remember having a slight issue with Yngwie's tech, because he wasn't how do I put this politely? He wasn't the quickest at doing things. You know what I mean? But you know what? Other than that, I'm glad that we did it. I'm glad that we could put it together. And it was one of those nights where I don't think you'll ever see all those people, getting Corey Taylor to come on with Phil Campbell from Motorhead to do a Thin Lizzy song. That's what it was all about, man. Just completely taking people out of their normal comfort zone. And it was brilliant, wasn't it?
It was fantastic. And after talking of Yngwie's tech, I've never seen a man more nervous and sweating as much as him. He was so, poor bloke. Yngwie was just like throwing guitars at him. He was like having to catch stuff. And
I even remember, because I remember the poor guy during the setup at Wembley on the day was just stood there sweating, and then Yngwie's coming in. And there's one point where Yngwie just throws the guitar obviously behind him, and I'm obviously behind that. And I didn't want to add any pressure, but I said to him, you catch that guitar, because if you don't catch it, that's landing on me.
It's no extra pressure required there, but that was And the other thing I remember about the rehearsals, apart from the fact that with each of the guitar players that were coming in, they had their own tech, and then their manager was there, or whoever was there. And at one point, I remember looking, it was in the big room at Music Bank, wasn't it?
That's right.
Upstairs. And I remember looking around going, there's more people in here at this rehearsal than a lot of the gigs I've played. There were so many people. It was mental. And Yngwie came over, and it was, as you will remember, the turnaround of the artist was really quick. Yeah. So, we'd rehearsed for a couple of days or so, I think, and then they were coming in for 20 minutes each or something that.
Yeah.
So very quick turnaround. And I had my in-ear monitors in, and I was just, I can't remember what the songs were that he played, but there was one where a lot of the guitar lines were doubled on keyboards, or there was like this kind of trading solo thing. So I was just sort of doing that, and he came over, and I looked up, And he had obviously been talking to me for like 30 seconds, but I had my in-ears, so I couldn't even. So I just looked up, and he was there, and he sort of got his shirt open. He's got his cowboy boots on.
Yeah.
And he's kind of not shouting, but talking loudly at me.
Yes.
And I took my ears out, and he just went, so it's just like that, yeah? And then he went, and I was like, was that important or not? I don't know. I don't know what he just said. Missed all of it.
Oh, God, I love him because, yeah, man, the rehearsal, like I say, he had it cranked to 11, and he was with the, the shirt undone, and he is just that guy is on 11 all the time. But everyone was great. No one kicked off a stink. Everyone was cool, man. Honestly, I can't think of a negative thing. Everyone was great. Satch and we did, like the band, the house band. It was a lot of pressure, I think, on us with so much stuff to play. It was a 4-hour show, and you know what? I think we went about 2 minutes over curfew or something like that. It was something.
Really?
We absolutely nailed it. I looked through some pictures recently that would just been offloaded from my phone about that time. I didn't have many pictures that I'd taken from the day, but the one picture I do have is, I don't know if you remember, we had a bit of off stage time, so we went to the dressing room, and I think my wife and daughter came back as well in the middle of the show, and it's a picture of you in front of the TV because we put X Factor on in the dressing room. We're watching that, while this massive gig's going on. And there was us watching X Factor for about 10 minutes before we had to go back on.
Yeah, how do you normally warm up for a massive rock gig? Well, a bit of X Factor.
Bit of X Factor on a Saturday night. Don't know about you.
Off,
Great, man. Adam, this has been so much fun and great to chat. Thanks so much for your time, mate.
No, it's been a pleasure. It's lovely to see you again, man.
Likewise. Cheers.